another November is in the can, almost. As you know, I always like to cap off every year with a little martini olive to give a nice bit of variety to the month. And, well, one thing that occurred to me, the past 2 years have been resoundingly negative between my reviews of Never Say Never Again and Casino Royale. So, not only did I want to leave you on a positive note, I wanted to leave you on 3 positive notes, particularly in the wake of yet another delay of No Time to Die. I admit I'm very sad about that, because it would have been cool to cap off November this year with another review. Since last year I reviewed a really bad spy spoof movie, I decided, what the hey, let's cap off this year reviewing not 1, but 3 really great spy spoof movies. And of course I'm talking about the Austin Powers franchise kicked off in 1997. It was the brainchild of comedian Mike Myers. Of course, prior to this, most people knew him and loved him from Saturday Night Live, which in turn gave way to Wayne's World, a pair of comedies which, frankly, I think have aged insanely well. Well, one thing Mike Myers had always said he was a fan of was the spy genre. Him and his father used to watch all the great spy movies, James Bond aside. He, of course, watched the Flint movies with James Coburn. Of course, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was another prime example. And actually, and we'll get into this a little bit, the Ipcress File is another prime example. Obviously, not being on Saturday Night Live anymore, he wasn't able to come up with a whole bunch of new characters, and he really wanted to do something relating to the spy genre, which is something he loved. So he got in contact with Jay Roach, and we get the notorious spy spoof trilogy Austin Powers, beginning with Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, which kicked off in 97. Then we had The Spy Who Shagged Me in 1999, and then we had Goldmember, which I recall, I believe was 2002. The fascinating thing about this trilogy is that what started as just a really good parody of a beloved genre ended up kind of snowballing and becoming something much more momentous, something much more deeply ingrained in pop culture, to the point where it actually transcended beyond being just a parody movie trilogy. Nowadays, when people see the image of Blofeld, particularly Donald Pleasence's, their first thought now actually veers to Dr. Evil. And I think a lot of that is because they took the pre-existing iconography of Donald Pleasence's Blofeld and they were able to turn it into something different. Of course, it also helps that even though Myers denied it initially, he made Dr. Evil's personality based on his old friend Lorne Michaels. Or was it the right hand? I think he alternated. And it's really something to admire when you take into account that Austin Powers International Man of Mystery was not a box office juggernaut when it came out. It wasn't until it came out on home video that it became the massive sensation it became, and ultimately warranted the sequel, and that did so well that we ended up getting Goldmember. And I figured, let's cap off November on an optimistic note, and let's talk about this wonderful comedy trilogy. But as an extra bit of fun, I'm going to do this also in my patented less to more format. So we are going to actually start by talking about the third installment in the franchise, Goldmember. Around this point, Austin Powers was absolutely skyrocketing in the cultural zeitgeist. Now, you had all these people doing this as a sign of their being mischievous or their being devious. A lot of times they'll go, "How about no?" And of course, you had Mini-Me. Vern Troyer, after his performance in The Spy Who Shagged Me, ended up throwing him into the spotlight, and he ended up getting a lot of great roles too. He ended up playing Napoleon in the Bruce Campbell show, Jack of All Trades. That's how popular he had actually become. And all he had to do was play mini Mike Myers, and that worked out great for him. And with the success of The Spy Who Shagged Me, it was just inevitable they were going to come out with a third one. Now, Goldmember had something of a rough start, particularly when it came to the promotion, naturally because the title was, well, let's face it, it was a little too similar to Goldfinger. And so the first teaser trailer just simply had a parody, ironically a parody of a parody, where you had Mini-Me dressed up as Austin, but recreating the whole dance sequence from the opening credits of the first movie, but all the actors are replaced with little people. Didn't really tell you at all what the movie is going to be, but you just know that, oh, okay, the new Austin Powers movie's coming around, and obviously at some point Mini-Me's going to turn into, there's going to be a mini Austin. So we have no context, but it was amusing. Finally, the litigation ended, and they were able to move forward and call the movie Goldmember. Not sure about the intricacies of the case. I just guess they figured Goldmember being a parody meant that it was not exempt under copyright laws, I suppose. I don't know. Comment section, please clarify. I'd love to hear you. And I will say 2002 was actually a really good summer for it to come out, because that was also the summer that Spider-Man came out. That was another blockbuster summer, and also Attack of the Clones, which was going to make money no matter what. But Goldmember was another one that came out this summer, and it was, as expected, a big hit. The only hitch, on the other hand, it wasn't received as well. A lot of people felt that the franchise may have run its course and that some of the characters are growing thin. A very good argument could definitely be made on that claim. I will say it's not my favorite of the trilogy, but is it a bad movie? Hell no. It is still incredibly funny, and there's still a lot of new things they throw into the mix here. Of course, the best thing that gets thrown into this one is that we get to meet Austin Powers' dad. It is actually a known fact that they courted Sean Connery to come in and play Nigel Powers, which would have been wonderful, and it was a pretty obvious reason why they went to him first, because, well, he's James Bond. But he turned down the offer for one reason or another. I believe League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came a little bit later, and everyone knows that that's the movie that killed the acting bug for him. So I don't believe that he was courting retirement around that point. In essence, he said no. So they went to another choice, and frankly, the much more appropriate choice. They went to Michael Caine. Now, the reason why I say Michael Caine's choice was much more appropriate is because the look of Austin Powers was actually heavily based on the character that Michael Caine played in the Ipcress file. Michael Caine has a lot more experience with comedy. He has better comedic timing, and honestly, when you look at Nigel Powers opposite Austin Powers, it is so easy to make the connection that he is Austin's father. I will say Michael Caine steals every damn scene he's in. He is easily the MVP of Goldmember. Now, this may just be because I'm a nut for British culture, but the one scene that had me losing my shit in a packed theater where a lot of people were kind of laughing just casually, where I was losing it, is the scene pretty much when we meet Nigel Powers, when him and Austin have a full conversation in what they call English.
Don't you remember the Crimbo Din Din we had with the grotty Scotsman?
Oh, the one that was all 6s and 7s.
Yeah.
The subtitles. Now, you're thinking that the subtitles are totally made up. For the uninitiated, you're going to see those subtitles, and a lot of them probably think that they're, not matching the subtitles with what they're actually saying. Kind of like what Mike Myers did in Wayne's World with the Cantonese sequence. No, in fact, everything they're saying on screen actually does match up with the translation at the bottom, and it is actually quite perfect. And it's the one scene in Goldmember, for as many times I've watched it, I lose it every time I watch it because it's so perfectly timed. Mike Myers and Michael Caine are just perfectly zinging them back and forth beyond each other. It's great verbal tennis, and they're both playing it beautifully. Around this point, a lot of pop stars were starting to act, and a lot of them were turning out some pretty bad movies. A good example is Britney Spears, which did Crossroads. Mandy Moore definitely fared a lot better down the line, but even she had a shaky start. So when Beyonce Knowles, at this point, before she was just Beyonce, she was Beyonce Knowles, when she made this movie, that was something that kind of made people a little weary. I only knew that she was with Destiny's Child. I think this was around the time she was about to go solo, but I had no hate. The fact that she was meant to reflect the 1970s and, of course, the blaxploitation era with, naturally, Pam Grier, I didn't question it. And add on to it, the way they introduce her, it fits perfectly with the talents that she had. And the one thing I can give to her is that you can tell she did her research as far as the way she carried herself. And in a parody world, she did make for a great parody of blaxploitation characters. Now, Beyonce doesn't really give, a performance I would say is comedic genius, but I will say, when it comes to being a parody of a particular aesthetic from a particular era, she does a great job. Now, I'd say if there's anything that's off about it, actually has nothing to do with her alone. Her chemistry with Mike Myers, not so much. I will say, if you had to ask me who was the best Austin Powers role, definitely not Foxy Cleopatra. She's great on her own, but... So, if you're wondering why I'm calling this my least favorite of the Austin Powers movies, I think a lot of it just comes to a very simple principle. There's a lot of retread going on in this movie. There's a lot of redoing a lot of bits from previous movies. Of course, they had the great bit with the rocket and Spyro Shag Me. They did it again this time with a satellite shaped like boobs. Fortunately, they don't drag the bit out long, but even then, the fact that you can see that they're doing it again, you're just like, ah. And they even try to lampshade it by having Ozzy Osbourne show up.
Boobs! These filmmakers are just boobs.
Yeah, no, I get what you're doing, and it's not working. Just because you call it out doesn't mean that you're absolved of your comedic sins with that. So there is a lot of familiar territory in a lot of the jokes they do, and there's a lot of things that a lot of the characters do which have actually gotten pretty tired by this point. I mean, Dr. Evil doing his musical number in Spyro Shag Me was outstanding, it was fun, but it was also brief. But then all of a sudden we get another one in this one, and it just feels forced. It just feels like because it was so popular last time, we got to do it again. Only this one doesn't really feel like it contributes to anything as far as moving the scene forward. And then when it leads to the resolution of that scene, you're going, how did they get to the conclusion that they want to work with him because of this song? I don't know. It just did not work. It just felt tacked on. It was overall feeling that this movie was just because the other ones did well and that they had a cash cow and they just want to keep going with it. Now, there were some tried and true bits which definitely continue to work. Like, I'll definitely say, I will always say one of my favorite things about the trilogy as a whole has been the relationship between Dr. Evil and Scott.
What is it now?
No, nothing. You know what? I agree. Preparation H does feel good, on the whole.
Well, I'm glad we're spreckensy the same lingity.
The Scotty Don't this time was pretty much the next chapter of the Odyssey of shh, zip it, and now this. But honestly, I think the thing I liked about this one was because, I think because Seth Green is such an astute comedic actor and is actually really good with improv. You see Scott is just like, oh, guys, doing this again. And it's almost to the point where he's actually just so tired of it, but now he's like, oh, yeah, will you stop? So the bit still works because you can tell they're evolving the bit. So I don't mind so much if you're going to retread the bits, but you got to keep evolving it. And there are some times where you never really feel like they do, and I think that's one of the major problems with Goldmember. I'd say another thing that didn't work as well this go around is some of the newer elements that got added in. I think the major thing that didn't work, unfortunately, is Goldmember himself. He is the title character for all intents and purposes. He is the person who is supposed to be built up as like the next big thing in this franchise, and the major problem he has is that he's not even so much a character. He's just a whole bunch of quirks in a big Dutch bag full of clogs. You never really get any sort of humanity of the character. And the one thing I gotta say I loved about the Austin Powers franchise prior to this is that, unlike most parody movies, these characters actually have identities. They actually have personalities. There's actually heart to these movies. There's actually emotion, as far as emotion should be in these movies. And even the Fat Bastard had a monologue where he actually talks about how sad he is for being fat. Goldmember, not so much. He just has a quirk. He's a hedonist. He has a gold fetish. And he likes peeling off his skin and eating it. And there's even points in the movie where he's actually shelved. He's actually just sitting by while Dr. Evil's pretty much taking the spotlight, as he should. So, for a character who's supposed to be drawing the focus because he's the title character, he's pretty much a missed character. He's just there for some gross-out gags, for Mike Myers to play a fourth character, and, again, play him well, but it's just not even remotely as fun as the other characters he plays in this franchise. Now, there's one aspect of the movie which I'm at war with myself. On one side, I, among many people who saw it initially in the theater, lost our minds because we were laughing our ass off because we didn't realize that the franchise got this big, that we were going to have all this. But there's a part of me that also feels that it goes on too long to the point where it becomes ridiculously self-indulgent. You gotta talk about the opening credits. Now, cameos are a load of fun, and I think the reason why they're fun is always the matter of who it is, their placement, like why are they here all of a sudden, and if you time it right, if you pick the right person to show up at that particular time, it is gold. And the opening of Goldmember starts off exactly that, gold, because it begins with this very big Jerry Bruckheimer-esque sequence, and you're just going, that doesn't seem like Mike Myers at all, and then all of a sudden the camera pans up, and it's frickin' Tom Cruise.
Yeah, baby.
I was impressed that he was able to take the time aside to film this actually pretty funny cameo, and then here comes freaking Gwyneth Paltrow with a really great spy spoof name, a name that wouldn't have been amiss during the Roger Moore era, and then you get Kevin Spacey back in the days when it was okay to like him, and then the one that just, the entire audience lost their minds.
Hey, assholes!
You know that the second you see Dr. Evil, you're going to see Mini-Me's not going to be far behind. You're just like, oh god, where are they going to... Who's it going to be? And then it's freaking Danny DeVito. The whole audience roared, and it was just amazing. And you're wondering what all this is about, and then you realize, oh, it's a movie being made about Austin, and then there's Steven Spielberg. Great. Steven Spielberg's always welcome. Breaking the Fourth Wall, or Quincy Jones. It's fine, but I think you're risky. Well, then you throw in Britney Spears. Though I do have to give her a little bit of credit. She wanted to do this specifically because she wanted to be a fembot. Most other people doing that kind of thing wouldn't think it's funny at all, but she did. So I'll give her that. On my final beef with Goldmember, I'm actually going to kind of get into it a little deeper when we get to it, but I'm just going to leave it with this one question. What happened to Felicity? They took the time to tell us what happened to Vanessa in The Spy Who Shagged Me, so why didn't you give us at least some kind of, at the very least, just give us a line telling us what happened to Felicity? Even the worst explanation is better than no explanation at all. Come on, give us something. But we'll get into that later on. You can definitely tell at this point the franchise was running out of steam at some points. There's even a little hint that maybe Mike Myers was just doing this for the paycheck at this juncture. But even then, there's still little things that made the movie work for me. And of course, a lot of it had to do with Nigel Powers and the relationship between him and Austin. And the resolution of Goldmember, I mean, some people could accuse it to being the comedic equivalent to Palpatine's Alive Again. But at the same time, this is Austin Powers. It's a parody series. If you're taking it that seriously, then you're watching these movies wrong. In the end, it's still a fun resolution where you have all the characters that you love ending up in a great place. And if they ever did do a fourth one, it does hint that it could springboard into something more special if they ever did. But as time has gone on, I think that's safe to say it's a far gone conclusion. But in the end, Goldmember is still not the best Austin Powers movie, but it's definitely not a bad movie. So there you go. So come back tomorrow on Narcotic Casserole for our next chapter of Double November, where I shall reveal to you my second favorite Austin Powers movie. You might actually be quite surprised by it. So in the meantime, like, share, subscribe, click, thou shalt be served, martini, shaken, not stirred.